So now we've reached the penultimate part of Herbert West Reanimator, Part 5, The Horror from the Shadows. So up until now, the two main characters had gone to college, been just out of college, and had gone into practice for themselves in a little doctor's office. And now we are in World War I. And this is interesting because, well, for all sorts of reasons, but in part because Lovecraft himself wanted to enlist in the war, and his mom wouldn't let him, even though he was an adult. And it always bothered him a lot that other people were going off and fighting the good fight and protecting people, and he was stuck at home because his mommy thought that he was too weak to do it. So in this story now, it's 1915, so it's 5 years after the previous story. So the two characters are about a decade out of college now, and they are well-known doctors in the Boston area, and they are deciding to go off to war, not because they want to be good citizens or anything like that, but because war involves lots of dead bodies, and that'll give them lots of fodder for their reanimation experiments. And the main character, as this happens in many of these Lovecraft stories, is the hesitant one and not really wanting to go along with it. But Herbert West is dragging him along and wanting to do all these things and forcing him to go along with him. Forcing is maybe too strong a word. Clearly the main character has some agency and could choose not to go, but he finds himself going anyway because it's just the way that he lives his life. So off they go into battle, or to the edge of battle, and they get all sorts of body parts. And now not only are they trying to resurrect people because they know at this point that if they get a freshly dead body and stick some goo into the body that they can get it to at least open its eyes again, but now they want to find out if I've got arms and legs and toes and other kinds of things, can I make those kinds of body parts do anything, and can the main body act without a head, and all sorts of other fairly iffy kinds of things that one would do on people. And the main character says, to be fair, that West does help some living people, so he is saving some soldiers along the way. But whenever he gets a chance, he's playing with dead bodies and playing with body parts and trying to do his experiments on them. And there's suspicious shot noises, which makes it sound like he's taking people who are not quite dead and then killing them so he can then practice on reanimating them and so on. So there they are, working with not only human bodies but also lizard bodies and other things, and doing all sorts of strange experiments on all these things. And then in March 1915, they have the person that had helped West get into the army in the first place is flying in on an airplane, and the airplane happens to go down. So to be fair for West, he didn't actually shoot the guy down or anything. It just happened to be that they were there when this plane went down, and now they got the body of the person that they should have cared about. And this, harkens back to the previous time when they were students, and they get the body, well, in that case, they went out and sought the body of the person who was in charge of the school. So in both of these cases, it's someone who had power over them and who they respected, but who wouldn't necessarily understand everything that they were working on as being ethical. And now they get to do whatever they want to with the body and malign it and maybe show to them that whatever they were working on was right, or at least could work. So the major that they get the body of had been nearly decapitated in this plane crash. So they finish off decapitating the head and sticking it in a jar, and then they go to work on the body part itself, the torso and the rest of it. And they try to reanimate that and see if they could get that to work without the brain working. And they are able to get the rest of the body to be sort of active, but then while they are reactivating the body, the head starts talking, and the head says, "Jump, Ronald, for God's sakes, jump," which you're assuming is what he said as his last words when the plane was being shot down. So much like the previous part, where the person who they were waking up screamed out, "Don't kill me," in essence, as his final words that he had said, we've got this body here saying, we have to jump out of the plane, we're about to die. So I don't find that to be horrific. It's really just a sign that the brain had remembered that scene as the last thing that it remembered before it died. And it sort of makes sense that it would be in its head. I suppose it's a sign that they are reanimating it and it's just not a brain dead mass of goo. But it doesn't seem scary to me. And the fact that they are reanimating this body that was given to them seems in a way less scary than the fact that they killed the previous one. At least in this case, they got a body who was already dead. There wasn't going to be any saving him, and all they did was stick some goo into him and get him to say the last words that he had said before. So, again, there are other stories that are much more interesting to me. Could it be because zombie stories are so commonplace now? I don't know if that's the reason I'm having, well, I have all sorts of reasons for having issues with these, but in general, there were other stories that were trope kinds of stories, and I enjoyed them anyway. But this one is a trope kind of story, and I don't find that I'm enjoying it very much, even aside from the racism kinds of issues. So I think one interesting thing about this section is that it did say that he's being worried about the fact that at this point, many years into their experiments, that there are all sorts of half-resurrected people that have vanished or that are in asylums or so on. So there's this sense that there are many bodies out there that they have worked on that cannot be accounted for. So that part is probably the most interesting part in terms of a horror story, but they barely mention it in passing. Now, I suppose part of that is that they don't want to foreshadow too heavily about the final chapter 6. But I would have liked to have leaned into that more, because otherwise this just feels like a filler chapter where they go to war, there's lots of dead body parts, and they once again resurrect a body who says what he was doing right before he died. So it doesn't seem like it really provides much new information. Or even like the descriptions of the engrafted skin and ghastly apertures and blood and veins. It's not described in a way that, and normally I don't like those kinds of descriptions in modern horror books, but this is so mild that it doesn't even really get to me. So again, I will get through the rest of the story, but I am not finding it something that I would tend to go back to once I go through, just to get through the sequence in order. Let me know what your thoughts on it are.